Welcome to the Live from Rest podcast, episode 12, in which we look at the subject of having a rant at God. I'm Steve Smith, your host and the author of the Live from Rest app. Each week in this podcast, we take time to explore the ancient art of being. We host conversations, short talks, and reflections about how we can live from rest in a world full of busyness and distraction. So I am delighted to welcome back my wonderful wife, Lucinda. Hello, Lucinda.
Hello.
And Lucinda, you're going to share some thoughts, aren't you, that came from a talk you recently gave on the subject of Martha. We're going to consider how we can take our upsets and concerns to God.
Yes, it's something I've been thinking about for myself and my own life and my own relationship with God. And it also occurred to me that if we want a greater degree of rest in our lives, if we want a greater degree of peace, then the issues that cause us to feel anxious or upset or bothered in some way need to be expressed. And often we don't really express them. Often we don't go to the person who's upset us or offended us. We find that confrontation difficult, and so we don't sort it out. And often it just rumbles along, if you like, in our hearts and in our minds, and we go over what happened and we think, I should have said this and why didn't I say that, and we feel upset again at the way we've been treated or the way we were hurt or the way maybe we treated somebody. And these things don't facilitate peace and rest. And I was thinking about myself and thinking, how good am I at expressing these things to God? Or do I just sort of keep them to myself, really? Sometimes thinking that I'm telling God, but I'm not actually telling him. I'm just muttering and mumbling and grumbling and complaining without actually talking to him.
Sure.
And I've been looking at Martha, the story of Martha, not from the traditional sense in that she was a doer and Mary sat quietly at Jesus' feet while Martha got distracted with many things. I wasn't looking at that. I was interested in the relationship she had with Jesus, really, because when the sisters realised that Jesus isn't going to come after Lazarus has become very ill, and they send a word to Jesus to come quickly because they know that he can heal him, and then he doesn't come, for quite a while, a couple of days. Finally he arrives and their dear brother has died, and Martha just blurts out to Jesus, Lord, if only you'd been here, my brother wouldn't have died. And I often think, how did she say that? And what was behind all those words? Was it a statement? Was she just saying, well, if you'd been here, he wouldn't have died? Fact, potentially. Or was it sort of a bit mean and a bit vindictive? Or, which I think this is possibly the truth, is she just very, very disappointed, feeling betrayed perhaps? The three siblings were Jesus's very good friends, and he'd spent a lot of time in their home. They knew each other well. And I imagine she would have been feeling really, really let down, really. Well, where was he? Where was he? He was our friend.
Because she would have known that he could have been there much sooner, given the amount of time that he had had.
Exactly. And I sort of think of all the emotions and thoughts swirling around her head when he chose not to come immediately to Bethany. The two women, her and Mary, would now be left with no male protection, potentially rendering them pretty vulnerable in that culture. She'd heard about all the wonderful, miraculous healings that he had been doing. She may even have witnessed some of them. She knew that he loved them, and yet Lazarus had died with no apparent effort on Jesus' behalf to turn this awful situation around. And I think she would have felt really, really disappointed,
Yeah.
She knew he could have arrived earlier, like you just said, but it seemed that he didn't want to. And I sort of think, we're often in situations like that where something happens and we say, well, 1 and 1 equals 2. If God had wanted this, then this would have been the outcome. If that had happened before that, then that wouldn't have happened. If such and such and such and such, then this would have turned out differently. But actually, we don't have the full picture. We never have the full picture. We only see things from our own very narrow point of view. I don't know if you remember, well, you will remember, Steve, when we moved from number 7 Wilson Avenue. We were living in number 7 Wilson Avenue. We were renting this house.
In Brighton.
In Brighton. We were happily settled. We were in it for the long haul. And then one day we got an email from the landlord saying, please could you move out within the month? And it really threw us into a spin because we thought, well, why? We agreed with him. This was going to be a long-term agreement. And it was why? Why? Started thinking, oh my goodness, where are we going to live? Where are we going to find which is as nice as this house and this area and with the park next door and the church up the road and all of that? And then the landlord contacted us and said, oh, I'm buying number 9 next door. You can move in there if you want. And I remember thinking, but Lord, why? Why do we have to pack up this whole house and move next door? It just doesn't make any sense. What are you saying? What are you going on? Why is this going on? And I remember saying to my daughter, I just don't understand what God's doing. And she said to me, but Mum, this might not be about you. Why do you think it's about you? Maybe he needs, those new tenants to live here because, you're going to influence them. Or maybe there's other stuff going on. And it really made me think. I thought, yeah, actually, why do we always think it's about us? And it seems that Martha had a really sweet and authentic relationship with Jesus. Her heart, her grieving heart is able to express her disappointment and perhaps her anger. Lord, if only you had been here. If you had been here, then Lazarus would not have died. She didn't pretend that things were okay. She didn't wear a mask. She didn't withdraw. She had a no holding back response. And I don't know about, you, some of you listeners, what your response is to situations that you just can't fathom, that you just can't work out as far as God's concerned. I know mine, I think, is to withdraw. I just don't bother to talk to him. I mean, it's not that I stop worshipping or stop reading my Bible, but I just don't talk to him about the situation. When was the last time that you poured out your complaint in total honesty to Jesus? When did you last, go on a long drive and just absolutely tell him how it is? Just blurt out to him, well, Lord, why didn't you come? Why couldn't you have just left what you were doing and come? You love us. You know how much Lazarus means to us. You know now what's going to happen to women on their own. Why didn't you come? Why were you so busy? What were you doing? And, God, this makes me really feel like you don't care about me. This makes me feel like perhaps you don't love me as much as I thought you did. And we can talk like that to him. It's absolutely okay to talk to God like that. And revealing our deepest need does not take away from his love for us. It doesn't remove any love from him towards us. But I think it actually is an indication of intimacy. When we know that we are so loved, there is space there for the whole of who we are, not just the nice, kind parts, but the selfish, irritated, annoyed parts. The times when we say, well, Lord, why did she say that to me? That was just so unfair. She knew that I'd done this and this, so why did she go and say that to me? We can say that to God.
I guess actually expressing these things to God actually places us to hear back from him.
Yeah, absolutely.
In a way that we wouldn't hear back from him were we just to internalise our frustrations, our upset.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's what, considering Martha, that's what she did when perhaps the famous passage that when Martha and Mary are discussed, most often everyone thinks about the story where Jesus comes and Mary sits at his feet and Martha's frustrated because she's busy getting the supper ready. But again, we actually just see her being honest with Jesus, don't we? She actually expresses her frustration.
Yes, she says, "Don't you care that my sister's left me to serve?
Yeah.
Tell her to help me." That's a no holding back again, isn't it?
Sure.
And we can say that to God. Why am I doing this again? I'm on the coffee rota again. Lord, this just makes me feel used. This makes me feel, whatever it makes me feel. It's okay to share that with God. Mm-hmm. And the love of God is so wide and so deep and so broad that it can shoulder the whole of who we really are, the broken alongside the healed, the pain and the joy, the hope and the hopelessness of who we are. Listen to this biblical character's complaint. This is from the Message. So he's talking to God about somebody. Give him a short life and give his job to somebody else. Make orphans of his children. Dress his wife in widow's weeds. Turn his children into begging street urchins, evicted from their homes, homeless. May the bank foreclose and wipe him out, and strangers like vultures pick him clean. May there be no one around to help him out, no one willing to give his orphans a break. Is that in the Bible?
Sounds like someone who doesn't really know the ways of God.
Is that in the Bible? Speaking like that to God. Such brutal words. Such cruel thoughts towards another human being. Who would say such a thing? But it is in the Bible, and it's in Psalm 108, verse 8, spoken by King David. He's being honest. He feels aggrieved, deeply upset at being so badly treated. He wants revenge. Have you never felt like that? I have, but I didn't tell God. I just muttered and murmured and boiled and raged, as if he who sees everything didn't see my distress. But I think this was in the days when I didn't really believe that God's love for me was unconditional. I sort of felt that I had to, live in such a way that was acceptable to him, present myself to him in a way that was okay. There were bits about me that I didn't want him to see. Yeah, how about you? How about you who are listening? What are you hiding? What are you hiding? I held a lot of offence for many, many years.
Yeah.
Max Lucado, the author, says that the grave unearths our view of God. And he's absolutely right. How often have we heard, God, if you existed, my child wouldn't have died. If you had answered my prayers, my life wouldn't be empty. If you cared, my mother wouldn't have developed cancer. And a confrontation with tragedy or crisis actually exposes the foundations on which our lives are really built. And in those difficult times, our belief system is brutally forced out into the light from the shadows of daily life. And we are often guilty of demanding to know why God doesn't do things the way we want it done, when we want it done. But from experience, we don't often get an answer to the what and the why and the where questions that we ask of God. And yet we ask them. And it's okay to ask them. I really believe it's absolutely okay to ask them. But having asked them, I think we need to also lay it down, hear him, like you've said, Steve, and also do what we need to do. And then what we can't deal with, changing another person, for example, we have to leave that with him. And I think in the laying down, there can come a peace and a rest that doesn't come when we try and sort these things out ourselves, I suppose.
Yeah. I think there are, you've mentioned David in that particular psalm, and there are, I think, many other psalms where David expresses his frustration, his grief, his upset, how his tears, how he's crying all night long, how he can feel every bone in his body. but that then sets him up to then praise God, to actually choose to say, "Yet will I praise you," and that's also the case with Habakkuk. And we've put a new meditation on the Live from Rest app, and I think it's a very useful prayer, the prayer of Habakkuk. Habakkuk just questioning the fairness of God, wondering why the evil prosper, and there's this long complaint, but despite that, having expressed himself, having had his rant at God, he then comes to the place where he says, "But yet I will praise you." And I guess that's one of the great advantages, one of the great benefits of having a rant, is that it then puts us in a place where we can then say, "Yet I will rejoice in the Lord." And let me just quote from Habakkuk, and it's Habakkuk chapter 3. "Though the fig tree does not blossom, and there is no fruit on the vines, though the produce of the olive tree fails, and the fields yield no food, though the flock is cut off from the fold, and there are no cattle in the stalls, yet I will rejoice in the Lord. I will be joyful in the God of my salvation."
Yeah.
And I just had this feeling that we would all do well just to be honest with God, to express our frustrations, our challenges, our hurt, our pain, and then to move on to praising God, to being grateful, rather than suppressing, rather than pushing things down, and then trying to do it out of a place of sort of false piety, if that's the right way of putting it.
Yeah, I think when we're really brutally honest with God, somehow in the speaking out to Him, I think especially if you do it aloud, it kind of, I don't know, it can help you just get it into perspective somehow. When I did this recently, I ended up really repenting myself, of some of my own attitudes and things that I had said to somebody else. And I felt a lot better afterwards. If I hadn't had that time pouring out my complaint to God, then I don't think I would have been led to that place of repentance and then on to that place of peace and rest. So there is somehow, I think when you hear yourself saying the words aloud, it kind of you think, oh gosh, but I'm not so good myself.
Yeah. Well, that's a good encouragement. Actually, the discipline of praying out loud is a good encouragement. I remember somebody encouraging me to pray out loud a long time ago, and that does bring another dimension to praying, doesn't it?
On your own, you mean?
Yeah, when you're praying alone, to actually vocalise your prayers.
Yeah.
Well, I think that's good enough for now. Thank you so much, Lucinda, for joining us again.
Pleasure.
And we will have you again very soon, I hope. So thank you all for joining us on this podcast. We do hope you're enjoying this. We're very grateful for those of you that have got in touch with us. And if you are enjoying these podcasts as well as our app, really encourage you to share, use social media, use email, let other people know about us. If you would review or rate us, we would appreciate that very much as well. Do download our app, Live from Rest, available from Google Play and the Apple App Store, and find meditation rooted in the way of Jesus. So thank you so much for joining us, and we look forward to joining you again next week. Bye for now.
Bye.